In 2016, the Community Development Department was taking a new shape as a full-time housing coordinator position was created and a new economic development role was being created at the time. Through the strategic planning leading up to 2016, the community had elected leaders that pursued tax-based growth. If we were to do nothing and the tax base stayed stagnant, as inflation and costs rise, taxes naturally will rise to cover those same costs. So essentially, what you're trying to do is alleviate tax burden by getting more people to pay in. Historically, Northfield does not have a hefty industrial commercial tax base to begin with. Whether it be the two colleges, significant residential growth over a period of time, commercial and industrial development just didn't occur at the same rate as other communities, neighboring communities. In order to do that, you need to have opportunities like businesses who are expanding, land for commercial projects, and new types of business to come into the community. I serve as a point of contact for current businesses, interested businesses to come to the community. When you have somebody in my role playing an intermediary between government regulation and kind of business relationship, it helps foster pro-business sentiment. And to have somebody in my role in a local government is key. Otherwise, business will just be left to itself, and the government might not have a good relationship. Tax increment financing, or TIF, is a tool that local governments can use to incentivize development. The community's priorities have been to retain businesses, grow employment opportunities, grow the tax base, provide affordable housing, and tax increment financing is a tool that we use to do those priorities. TIF is governed by state statute in the state of Minnesota. TIF can be a number of different things throughout the country. Minnesota, there's a list of kind of criteria that we have to fit into. There's no formula per se to how each TIF ought to be. It is very tailored to each community's preference, so long as it abides by the state requirements. We have housing projects that utilize TIF, we have business development that utilize TIF, and we have redevelopment projects that utilize TIF. So where the market isn't providing for housing, TIF has helped. Where the market hasn't provided for business growth, TIF has helped. And where the community tries to redevelop areas, blighted areas or underutilized areas, TIF has helped out. So by doing these types of projects, we're ending up with not only development that we want, but it's a net positive over the long term by gaining new tax base and tackling community priorities. It's key to understand that the city is not providing anything up front. There is no financial commitment to do anything before it's built. The developer has to build that building, they have to pay all taxes, and they will be reimbursed a portion of the taxes that they pay into. That is how TIF works in Northfield. So it's better that the city of Northfield facilitates TIF in projects like this to do reimbursement as opposed to, say, a tax cut. Northfield, through the TIF statute, can access the tax dollars for the school and for the county, whereas if it was just a tax cut, it would be only the city's portion. So in essence, we're pooling together funds from our local jurisdictions to help offset that over a period of time. By doing TIF the way we've done in a reimbursement process, there are certain objectives that they have to accomplish before any funds are released back to them. So you look at the development agreement, you look at the TIF agreement, they have to achieve every single one. They have to pay into their taxes, they have to be good stewards to the community. If and only if all of those requirements are fulfilled, that they get the reimbursement on an annual basis. And those requirements are checked annually. If the developer does not meet the requirements laid out in those agreements, they do not get any reimbursement. They forfeit their TIF obligation. So unfortunately, the only reason we were talking to the Archer House about tax increment financing is because it burned down. Had it not, we wouldn't be having the conversation, because the Archer House, long-standing, beautiful historic building, tragically burned down in 2020. It's probably 2021 when conversations had begun about how to package a deal for a new building project. When you look at challenges for the Archer House site in particular, people probably see a relatively large site. You walk downtown, there's not many big holes in the ground, fortunately. But unfortunately, that site has several things working against it. In new construction, constrained sites between a road, a river, and two other buildings really starts to constrain what your options are. When you're also building in a historic downtown, you then have another constraint on how high it can go up. So you're creating this box, and Northfield sits on a foundation of bedrock near the riverbed. And so you're creating another constraint. When you talk about new building, all of these constraints, you put it in this box, new development begins to be more challenging. Economics in those types of projects prefer to maximize opportunity, and those constraints put a burden on generating anything that would really cash flow positively. We live in a capitalistic society, and when you put all of those types of constraints on a new development project, in the world that we live in with high interest rates, it's hard to get cash and raise equity for that type of project. You can sit on a project for a long time just because the economics of the situation aren't ideal. It was paramount to the success of the downtown as a crucial anchor, and losing that and the history behind it is just devastating for the community. When you have a sizable hole like that, it becomes a security issue for sure, or a safety issue, and it opens up potential opportunity for the downtown not to recover. And so in an effort to ensure that that doesn't occur, the project team has been dedicated to rebuilding on that site. Getting a lot of community benefit was paramount to success on both sides. So being in those negotiations where we're getting public bathrooms, we're going to get a sustainable building, we're going to get a riverfront that isn't cluttered with parking, and we're getting a brand new building to improve housing in the downtown, those negotiations were successful. Public bathrooms are a necessity to a thriving downtown area. In the previous Archer House, there were public bathrooms, and in the spirit of maintaining that and utilizing TIF as a means to ensure that happens, we got public restrooms in the Archer. When you are providing city incentives, a community is afforded the opportunity to negotiate those terms however they deem fit. In Northfield's case, not only have we negotiated sustainable building policies when projects come to the table, but there are specific priorities for each project. And in this case, downtown public restrooms was part of the negotiation. Put it into context of how the Archer deal is going to operate. Now that we have the terms negotiated, approved by the council, the developer, we're on the same page, they have to go out and finance the thing. They have to build this before they receive anything from the city. And that's a tall task still, because we're not in an ideal position economically to build these types of projects, but they are attempting to make it work. So by building it, generating new valuation on this site, once it is finished, it is occupied, it is paying taxes, a portion of tax liability that they pay, the full amount that's assessed, a portion of that will be reimbursed back to the developer over a period of time, which in this case has been estimated to take 26 years to fulfill that obligation. As I look back over the negotiations for the Archer House, I feel that we both, the developer and the city, got a good deal at the end of it all. And hopefully we'll get a fantastic looking building that will be in this downtown for generations to come. Fortunately, the city of Northfield has a wonderful business by the name of Aurora Pharmaceuticals. It started off as a veterinarian clinic back in the day, and it has taken off to be probably one of the most premier research and development firms that Rice County, let alone the state, has when it comes to pharmaceutical development. They've been on a trajectory of immense growth. And where they're located, fortunately and unfortunately, it doesn't really allow for a lot of growth from a square footage standpoint. They needed some additional land to square off the site and needed tax increment financing to help offset some of the rising costs that were occurring at that time. This is an economic development TIF, very short term, helping impact the business today because it's only over an 8-year period. They were able to successfully expand that building to facilitate the growth. So negotiations were rather limited because their needs were limited, and the community's priority at that time, and still is today, is retention of businesses and tax growth. The business ownership has its roots in the Northfield area, and so ideally they wanted to retain the business in Northfield. However, business interests have positioned the business to look elsewhere, even out of state. This retention opportunity, utilizing TIF, was paramount to retaining their business in Northfield and state of Minnesota. Economic development TIF districts are set up for 8 years. We were able to fulfill our obligation in 6 years because of how successful that valuation has been on that building. So by decertifying a TIF district early in Aurora Pharmaceuticals case, all of that building then gets back on the tax rolls as is. There's no reimbursement, and they'll start paying into the general funds for the county, the school district, and the city. Affordable housing projects that have utilized tax increment financing, the Spring Creek Townhome project has been the most successful use of tax increment financing, TIF. So much so that there's been 2 iterations. Spring Creek 1 happened in 2013 to provide affordable housing. Three Rivers Community Action was the lead developer, and partnering with the Minnesota Housing Finance Agency and the city, we were successful in creating affordable housing arrangements on HRA-owned land. HRA still owned land adjacent to that property, and in 2019, 2020, the developer came back and asked that we do a similar project again. That project has now concluded. We have 2 TIF districts that have incentivized and provided affordable housing development to occur where it wasn't previously. Common concern that I hear often, and the council hears often too, when I'm standing in front of them asking about, are we doing too many TIF districts, Nate? And the answer is no. When you look at the tax base that Northfield has, we have about 5 to 6% in TIF districts as part of the broader tax base. Other communities of similar size, they can be in the ballpark of 15 to 20% of their tax base locked into TIF districts. In referencing some of those communities, we're in a good place as far as how TIF is utilized and how that impacts our current tax base. And if we're in a position where we can decertify things early, that's even better for us, because then we're allowed the opportunity to do more. We're not shelling out money. It's not as if we're providing an upfront cash bundle of funds. We're utilizing their funds to reimburse them over a period of time. It's not like the taxpayers are out any money. It's as if that development didn't occur in the first place. It's the least amount of risk that the city can position itself to assist private development. When Northfield positions itself to utilize TIF in a way that's the least amount of risk for the biggest gain, I think we're in a really great spot. Other communities, not so much. Sometimes they use TIF to provide upfront financing through a general obligation bond. That is then a cash handout. Then the community relies on the TIF proceeds to pay itself back. Northfield's done that 1 or 2 times way back in the day, and we haven't anymore. I think Northfield has been a good steward of financial security for the community when it comes to incentivizing development.